Okay, so I think we can resume and basically enter the let's say the first topic of this course, that is talking a little bit about JavaScript, and especially what is different, what's the difference between JavaScript and traditional programming languages that you might have already seen. Before talking about this, well, JavaScript is a standard, we said, and the implementation, so the code that is able to interpret JavaScript, so read JavaScript and execute the code, comes in different flavors. Okay, so there are different JavaScript so-called engines. So if you like, we can call them runtimes, in the sense, not in the sense that environment that are able to run the code. Okay, and basically there were 4 of them. Actually, this is just for your knowledge, because if they implement the standard JavaScript, they should be the same. They should appear the same. Okay. Of course, Google has its own browser, and its own browser has a JavaScript engine. That means it's able to execute JavaScript. Mozilla has its own JavaScript engine. That's another, let's say, browser. It's a company, but basically the name of the browser, Firefox, what we saw before, made by Mozilla. It's another browser. There was another one by Microsoft in Edge, but now they converted to another engine, I think to V8, if I'm not wrong. And that's the one by Apple. And why we are nominating all of them? Just because actually the standard is one thing and the implementation is another thing. So it's true that there exists a standard, but actually if nobody enforce the fact that you should implement the whole standard correctly as specified in the standard, basically everybody will do what he or she wants. Okay, so it means that depending on the implementation, so these engines that you're using, some functionalities will be available or not. But luckily for us, the main functionalities that we will use are available in any environment, because they are very basic stuff. Okay, so there are peculiar functionalities that sometimes differ a little bit, or not implemented, or implemented differently in different engines. So this is just an introduction to make you aware of the fact that you cannot just say, okay, this really nice functionality in the standard, okay, I will use it and expect it will work everywhere, in any browser, in any engine, and so on. Okay. As I told you, I mean, the basic ones, of course, they will work. Otherwise, it would be too difficult. But there are, some very maybe advanced functionalities, we could say, or maybe some old ones which are not used that much, which might differ between different engines. Okay. In case it happens, we will tell you. Okay, during this course. But basically, I mean, for the purpose of this course, we can simply mostly ignore this stuff. Okay, so these functionalities are very peculiar. Okay, JavaScript is a language that evolves. Okay, so it gets improved because it's so much used. So it will be improved. Okay, by the technical committee that we saw before. But one rule that, I mean, the only rule that the committee tries to follow is that once something is accepted as valid JavaScript, there will not be a future change to the language that caused the code to become invalid JavaScript. So basically, it's backward compatible. If something goes into the standard at a certain point, it will be supported in the future, no matter what the standard will change to. Okay, Of course, it's not forwards compatible. I mean, we cannot predict the future, so it means that an engine that supports a certain version of the standard, I mean, it's not guaranteed to support future versions, okay? Because there might be something that is not yet supported, okay? Actually, this is true. I mean, this we don't break the web, which is basically a backward compatibility. That's true, but with an exception. There's this strict mode that the programmer can use to disable very old and dangerous semantics of the language. So, you know, functionalities that that we can avoid and that are dangerous because they are not easy to understand. They can have a lot of side effects, unexpected side effects, and so on. So at a certain point, the developer of the JavaScript language decided that it was possible to enable a mode of working of the JavaScript that disabled certain behavior. So some JavaScript code, old JavaScript code, might not run in strict mode. But this has more advantages than disadvantages, and actually what we will do is always use this strict mode, okay? Because it saves us a lot of problems, headaches when we have code that might easily yield bugs, okay? Okay, so what are we going to do if we develop for a certain version of JavaScript? As I told you before, the ES6, okay, that's the version we are targeting, and we would like to use some functionality that was introduced later. Well, actually, either we have an engine, so one of the previous one that already supports the new version, or we need to find another solution. And the solution is typically, you know, ask some automatic program to translate the code into an older version of JavaScript, or have some libraries added, typically when you need to use new objects and new library functions which are not yet present in a certain version of the standard. Okay? But as I told you, in the rest of the course, we will use a framework for React that will do this for us. Okay, so the transpiling and polyfilling will be done for us. Okay, so in short, we don't have to care about this. For we can use more recent functionalities without caring of the fact that the browser supports it or not, or the engine supports it or not, because when the code is put into production, so it's used in the web application, it will be translated if necessary. Okay, it will be adjusted automatically if necessary. Okay, just a few words about the JavaScript execution environment. I told you we can run JavaScript in the browsers, and that's what is done for web applications normally. Okay, in the runtime environment, so the page loads JavaScript and execute the code. Normal. It can also be run in development mode. We will have a look maybe in a minute. But there are also other places where we can run JavaScript. And the place that we are going to use in this course is this Node.js environment. So basically, Node.js is an interpreter of JavaScript written in native code. So you have to install it. Indeed, it's something that you need to install in those install instructions. And then you can run JavaScript program on the computer without the browser, so outside the web applications and so on. And you can install it as a program on any system because it's basically available for any system. Okay, we say the Linux, Windows, and etc. And also there are tools which are very useful, and we will use it the first week or maybe 2 weeks of this course. In particular, this JavaScript tutor, which is a very nice, let's say, web application. It's a web application in the end that is able to show us step by step the execution of the code, and also a graphical representation of the variable, etc., in the memory of JavaScript. So we understand how things work by visualizing them. Okay. So this is the JavaScript tutor. That's a link. The link is Python tutor, even if it's JavaScript. pythontutor.com/JavaScript. You can simply click and it will open. And we can type code in JavaScript. Let's have an example. Very simple. Let A1 let B equal to a vector. Okay. Just to show you something. And then we will talk about the language. Okay, you can execute the code step by step. You see the result on the right. Okay, that's an array. That's the representation of the array. The two slots with the values and so on. Okay, so it helps you in the beginning, and then you will have. I mean, your mind will have this representation when you program. I mean, just a programming language. I mean, you can create vectors, objects, and so on. Okay, but in the beginning, it is useful to learn. Okay. Where's the? Okay. Okay. The JavaScript console of the browser. This is a standard browser. I mean, it's the browser that you install on your computer. Okay, it's not a special version. But if you go, there should be, yeah, browser cons. No, sorry, the browser console. It's another thing. Setups. More tools. Web developer tools. Yes. Here you have a JavaScript console. Okay, we can type what we did before. Let me see. Yes, I can increase it. Okay, that's the JavaScript environment inside the browser. So that's the JavaScript engine running, and that v 2 3. Okay, but here you don't have any graphical representation and so on. Okay, so if you type, you have the, you know, you can show something, you can do your experiment in JavaScript, but of course it's very inconvenient. This is you know, useful because it runs in the browser, so it sees what is available in the browser environment. Okay, so the elements of the page and so on, which are of course not available in something which is outside of the browser. Okay, but just be aware of the fact that this is available in any browser. Okay, typically not a mobile version because, you know, you cannot really use it. But you know, on the desktop version of the browsers, any browser that you installed, you have this JavaScript console, in which you can also experiment a little bit if you like. So this is just Firefox. I like showing Firefox because it renders better for what we are going to do. But I mean, that's in Chrome and so on. Okay. Well, actually, just be aware of the fact that when the browser version changes, this item in the menu might, you know, shift a little bit. Like this is developer, the other was advanced tools, and so on. Okay, so you need to search a little bit for this item. Okay, and so let's talk about JavaScript now. Okay. Let's not lose time. Actually, one file in JavaScript is one JavaScript program. JavaScript doesn't support the use of multiple files as many other languages to define programs. One JavaScript file is one program, at least in theory. Then there are tricks, you know, to use more files because, of course, they are more convenient. But each file is loaded independently, and cannot communicate with the other files. Again, every time we talk about JavaScript, try to think when and why it was born. It was born for something that was, programming inside a web page. So it made sense that, okay, there's just one program because there's just one page. Okay, that's why, every single JavaScript file is one single JavaScript program. Okay, and then of course it evolved 30 years, and so basically there's some way to make it work with multiple files. But otherwise, if you need to make different files or programs communicate, you need that bad thing that is called the global state or global variables. Okay, the things any programming course recommend not to use, because you decide the name, and then the other programs need to agree on the name. You need to not to reuse the same names, and a lot of problems, right? But that's how it works. And another important thing is that the file is entirely parsed, and only after it is parsed, it's executed, starting from top, so first instruction to the bottom to the last instruction. Okay, that's actually similar to Python if you studied Python. Okay, the parser, so the interpreter, parse the file. So it reads the file, it checks if it's syntactically correct. So you didn't miss, like in Python, indentation. Here you close the parentheses and so on. So everything is okay, and then it starts the execution from the beginning. Okay, and as any other programming languages, has a standard library. Okay, like to manipulate, for instance, strings. Or to do input output and stuff like that. Of course, JavaScript is a bit peculiar for input output, but let's say, this common functionality that you expect in any language, like you would like to have a mathematical operation, square root, whatever. There are standard libraries that can do that. Okay, if things are not too strange. Okay. And then depending on the execution environment, there might be more. In the browser, there will be something related to the browser and so on. And of course, we will discuss about this later. In future weeks. JavaScript is written in Unicode. That means you can type basically whatever you like, even for the names of the variables and so on, as you see on the slide. But try not to abuse this behavior, okay? Because, may not be rendered correctly in case the environment, the development environment is different and so on. Okay, so it's true that you can assign, let's say, an emoticon to a variable in the sense of a single character, which is an emoticon, as a string to a variable. But try not to abuse these things. Okay. The language is very similar to C. C-like syntax. Okay, so you probably, hopefully, know C. And the difference is semicolons are useful but not mandatory, because they are automatically inserted by JavaScript, except in a few cases. We will come back to this in a few slides. It's case sensitive, so it's like C, no surprise. You can comment in the same ways. You can have identifiers. As usual, they start with letters, cannot start with numbers. Okay, but that's the same as C. Okay, or with $, underscore, and so on. A few reserved keywords, user stuff. If, else, while, etc. Okay. Semicolon. Yeah, it's already here. Well, actually, there are different styles of programming in JavaScript. Since it's automatically inserted, some people like not to use semicolon unless it's necessary, and some other people think that using semicolon is better for legibility. So, we don't really care. As long as you use a uniform style, it's fine. Okay. Also for the exam, we are not there counting, the semicolons. I mean, use your own style. Just try to be consistent, but it's more about yourself being able to understand the code easily than us reading the code. Then in big organizations and so on, there might be coding styles to follow, because of course if you are alone or just a few people and so the project is small, you can do more or less what you want. When the code base increases to millions of lines and so on, it starts to become difficult if everybody uses its own style. Okay, just be careful that the fact that you are not using semicolon might lead to unexpected behavior, because the new line, when you go to a new line, the flow of the program doesn't stop. I mean, it's not that because you go to a new line, that's a new instruction. Okay, so if what is on the new line can be attached to the previous line, JavaScript will do it unless you put a semicolon. So we can summarize this story, say, well, if I should put a semicolon, okay? So things that don't attach to each other if you don't expect, okay? In particular with the rounded and squared brackets on the new lines, because they are interpreted as function calls and arrays. And of course, if you put it on the new line, probably that's not what you want. Okay, the strict mode. We will always use a strict mode, and I encourage you to always use strict mode. How to use it is very simple. First line of our JavaScript code is a string. So double quote or single quote, doesn't matter. Use strict. Okay? Again, the semicolon is optional, but let's put it. Okay? This is very easy to put, and it's also compatible with older versions of JavaScript. It's just a string. Okay? So basically, JavaScript evaluates the string as a string, does nothing, and that's all, goes on. But modern JavaScript engines enter the strict mode, which disables a lot of dangerous behaviors. Okay? So it fixes some important language deficiencies and provides stronger error checking. Okay? So these are examples. For instance, just to give you an idea, if you start a number with 0 for some reason, in JavaScript, older JavaScript is interpreted as an octal literal. So it means a number in base 8. So if you put a 9, it gives you an error, and you have no idea why. Okay? These kind of behaviors are disabled, luckily, okay, which would require probably a lot of debugging for things which are simple and just, you may have forgotten about this, or just an error that should have caught much easier, an error that is easy to catch if you have let's say a standard predictable behavior, but if you have this old JavaScript behavior, it becomes difficult to find. Okay. So for instance, the fact that there are silent errors. Okay, no errors. There's an error, but JavaScript says nothing. Okay, so of course it becomes difficult to debug, and this luckily gets disabled. So always put this string. And let's see the first concepts. It seems trivial, right? Every course talking about the languages starts saying, well, okay, these are the values that you can use and so on. Well, first of all, that's what you need to remember. In JavaScript, values have types, while variables have no types. Variables are just boxes. They are boxes. There can be different values inside this box, different types of values. You're not declaring a number. You're declaring a variable. And then you decide that you put a number inside this variable. Okay, and these are the types which are allowed in JavaScript. There are basically only 5 primitive values. 2 are very simple. Okay, so those are the actual values, and the others are strings, numbers, and booleans. Okay, plus null and undefined. And then there are objects which can be, more complex data structures like array functions or something that we define ourselves. But the important thing is here, basically in a variable you can have either a string, a number, or a boolean, or 2 fixed values which are null and undefined. Okay, or an object. I mean, of course, a reference to an object. Okay. A few words about Boolean types. Of course, Booleans you can write false and true, but you know that the usefulness of the Boolean type is in conditional operation, when you write an if and you need to decide to do one thing or another thing. So basically you need to make sure of what is evaluated as true and what is evaluated as false in JavaScript. Okay, and this comes with some surprise, right? Here you start to see why JavaScript is so weird sometimes. For instance, of course, 0 is evaluated as false in a conditional expression, but also -0, also not a number, also undefined, so the special value that we saw before, also null, and also the empty string. Okay, while the empty array is not false, it's true. Okay, so you just need to get used to this behavior. I mean, JavaScript is full of these, let's say, strange behaviors. Okay, we will try to point them out when it's needed. Okay, and note that I mean, since these values evaluate as false in these conditional expressions, they are called falsy values. Okay, and the others, of course, are called truthy values. It means values which are not actually true or false, but if you need to convert them into a Boolean value, like in a conditional expression, will evaluate true or false. Okay, and when you do the comparisons, you can do it in 2 different ways. You can only compare the value, so that means try to put the 2 values into the same type and check if they are the same, or check if the value plus the type are the same. Okay, so this is the double equal sign or the triple equal sign. Of course, the single doesn't exist in the comparison because it's the assignment. So as we did before, a equal to 2. Okay. So here we start seeing, the first peculiar things of JavaScript. Numbers. No distinction between integers and reals. They're just numbers for JavaScript. Okay, integers are just numbers, .0 and so on. I mean, there are no fractional part. JavaScript doesn't have an integer type, just a number type. Okay, and they are converted to strings or from strings depending on the operation that you are doing. So we will spend a few words on that. And then, of course, the language improves and changes over time. So actually, at a certain point, the JavaScript committee decided to introduce also a new type. Okay, this big int. But actually, this is just a mention, just to let you know that what we are talking about is ES6, so the basic stuff. And then it might happen that something get changed during time, over time. Okay, but I mean, I think we never had the need to use these big numbers in this course. Special values, undefined. Undefined is a special value because it's the value that every variable has when it's not initialized. Okay, so if I declare a variable and I didn't assign any value, what happens is that it has a value. The value is undefined. Okay, that's a bit different from other languages. Like in C, it's undefined in the sense that you don't know, but there's a value, right? Here, instead, the value is decided. It's undefined, which is actually a value. Null, that's another value that you can use. Actually, it's more used by the programmer than the environment. It's like you have an array and you need to mark a place saying this is not, it's not yet initialized in my program. Of course, you can use undefined, but you can also use null, okay? It's convenient sometimes, okay? Null and undefined are called nullish values, okay? And then we already saw not a number, which is actually a number. Another weird thing of JavaScript, right? Actually, you know where not a number comes from, okay? You divide it by 0, it comes out not a number. But it's actually a number. For JavaScript, it's a number. So it means that it gets treated as a number in conversions between types and so on. Okay? I don't want to scare you, but typically we try not to use these strange behaviors. But when you go around in the internet and you find some strange JavaScript code that works and doesn't work and so on, sometimes they take advantage of these weird things, to surprise you, I would say. Okay? But let's try not to use too many strange things. Just be aware of the fact that sometimes JavaScript code can be a little bit strange. It might behave differently from what you might expect. Okay, variables are basically references. So it means that they contain the value in case the value is a simple type like a number or a Boolean. Or they contain a reference in case there are strings or other types like objects, arrays, and so on. Okay, and you can reuse variables again as in any other languages, but try to have a clean code. So if you have a variable, you give a name to the variable. You typically want to contain a certain value that has a certain meaning in your application. So you give a meaningful name and you don't reuse it. But just be aware of the fact that variables can be reused. If you read somebody else's code, be aware of the fact that variables can be reused and can be reused also with different types. Okay? So I mean with values with different types that can be put into the same variable, because the variable has no type. How can we declare a variable? Well, basically there are two ways of declaring a variable. Actually, four. We will arrive at four, but the two the two ways in bold, let the const, are the way that we recommend to use in this course. Okay. Older code used, or sometimes code that has some peculiarities might use var, but we don't use var in this course because it leads to a lot of confusions. And there is a fourth way of declaring a variable, which is actually not declaring it. We'll see in a minute. So when we want to declare a variable for which we would like to change the value later, we use let. Okay, as we saw before, let a equal to 5. Okay, let b equal to 10, whatever. If you don't expect that the value will change, you use const, okay, which is a sort of let where you cannot reassign the value. So basically, when you execute the code and there's an assignment to const, the execution environment will say, well, there's something wrong. It was a const, so check the code, and it will stop. Okay, so with this type error, for instance. And then this var, that was the old way of declaring a variable. So what's the difference between the ways of declaring a variable? Well, let the const is easy. They are easy to understand. Var, Well, var is more or less like let, but it can be redeclared. So you var a, etc. At a certain point of your code, again, var a equal to. Okay, this is another strange behavior of JavaScript. We don't like this kind of behaviors. Okay, it was already declared. Probably if I wrote 2 times var a, it means the second time I was wrong, because maybe I mistyped it. Maybe I wanted to say, I wanted to use a different name. I wanted to use it for another purpose. Okay, otherwise I would have simply used the name of the variable, not redeclaring the variable with the same name. Okay. And then if you declare a variable with var, at a certain point in your code, it starts to exist at the beginning of the code, even if it's declared in the middle. Another weird behavior. Okay? This is called hoisting. We will see an example in the next slides. Hoisting means lifting up the definition of a variable to the top of the current scope. Okay, in the global scope, it means at the top, at the beginning of the program. And of course, this is very counterintuitive, right? So you have something in the middle of the code, and it exists from the beginning. You can read the value before declaring the variable. Of course, it will be undefined. It doesn't mean that the program will give you an error. Okay, all the weird things of JavaScript. And none means that you can simply write a equal to something without declaring it. And this automatically is a global variable. And again, in the middle of the program, you write a equal to something, and it starts existing from the beginning. You don't even declare it. Okay? That's very, very dangerous behaviors, and we don't want to have them. The last behavior is forbidden in strict mode, luckily. So if we put use strict, when the interpreter reads the code and finds an undeclared variable, it will stop. And so basically it allows us to understand there's probably an error, a mistake in the program. Okay? Var is not forbidden. Why? Probably because there's a lot of legacy code that uses var, in libraries especially and so on. But I strongly suggest not to use var in your code. If I see a var at the exam in the code, I immediately ask, why did you use var? There's nothing that you cannot do with let const. Okay? So there's no reason to use var in the code. Okay? So the reason why you use var is probably you cut and paste it from some other places. So, but you need to be aware of what happens with var. Okay? That means it starts to exist before and so on. So let's see the example. And then we will try it with the Python tutor. So with that tool that visualize what's happening. So use strict, always use strict. Let A1 be 2, C true. Let A5, that's a syntax error. Let cannot be redefined, right? We can create a new scope. Well, actually, the scope concept is a bit difficult in JavaScript, so we leave it for later. But let's say let's suppose that the curly bracket opens a new scope, which is actually true in this case. So in a new scope, we can declare a variable with the same name as the outer scope. Okay, that's like C. Okay, you open the scope and you have a new set of a new space where you can redeclare variable. Just be aware of the fact that if you redeclare the same variable, you cannot access the value outside, because of course they have the same name and you don't have a way to say that's the outside one and not the inside one. Okay. let's try this example. So we will experiment a little bit with the Python tutor. Okay, so let me copy and paste. That's something that we would like to do, and we'll try to do every time during this course. So experiment a little bit while teaching, otherwise it gets really boring, right? So let's edit the code. There's some advertisement, you cannot do anything. I mean, last year was not there. Okay, so let's see what happens. Use strict, well, nothing. I mean, the execution environment entered the strict mode, so there's nothing that gets shown here. Let A1, so A starts to exist in the global frame, that means the global scope, and it gets a value 1. Const B2, fine, let's see, true. Okay, we enter a scope. Let A5, okay, so A, there's two A, there's the one outside and the one inside, okay, gets a value 5, we can print, okay, console log, it's the way to print stuff in JavaScript, okay, like the print in C, the print in Python and so on. So that's the console 5. And if we do console log A here outside the scope, we will get 1. Okay, and you also see that the A inside has disappeared because it's block scoped. So let is block scoped. That means that when the scope exits, the variables are destroyed, like in C. Okay, nothing special here. Okay, so we get 1. And so here you can experiment a little bit with the JavaScript, even though you don't have the node installed yet, the Visual Studio Code and so on, just to play. Okay, of course you cannot really paste very, very complex programs because you know it has some limitations, but it's good to experiment at least in the beginning. Okay, so let's see a more complex example. Use strict always. Function, so let's define a function. Okay, it's very simple. We'll see in a dedicated lecture, basically, functions. But here, you see, you give a simple name, a name, and you just put function, and you create a simple function. A function example, you give some parameters if you like, otherwise you can leave it empty, so eggs. Okay, that's a function, takes eggs as a parameter, and does things. Okay, and then you can call it as you do in C, in Python, and so on. Okay, you put a value, and this too is copied to eggs, can be used here. Okay, let A1, nothing particular. Okay, console log A1. Okay, console log B, well, B is not defined. This will stop the execution. Okay, if you are not in strict mode, B simply get used, okay, and the code proceeds, and basically you have a bug and you don't know. Okay, so that's why it was disabled. Console log C. See, you see, that's interesting. That doesn't stop the execution. Why? Because later in the code there's var C equal to something, A times B. You don't care. But var C, it's hoisted, we said before, hoisted. Means that var C is like if it was written at the beginning of the scope. Here, together with the let A. And which value has a variable which has not been initialized? We said before, it's undefined. So console log C is not an error. It just prints undefined. Okay? Undefined as a value of the content of C. Okay? That's why we don't want to use var, because this is probably something that doesn't work as we expect. Okay? We use the variable before initializing it, which is typically a bug. Okay, so if x greater than 1 and so on. And you see also that it's not necessary that x is greater than 1 to run into this problem, because I mean the var is hoisted before the program starts the execution. Program is parsed from top to bottom, so the execution environment of JavaScript creates the representation of the variables into the memory and hoists this var c. Okay, so it doesn't really matter if we enter or we don't enter in this block B and C. Okay, let B var C. It's hoisted. It exists. That's all. Okay, so that's why we don't want to use var. And then console log A, B, C. Okay, A, B is still not defined because it was defined into a block inside the if, so it doesn't exist outside the block. And C, now it has a value, and depending on the code, it will have a value like 1. Yeah, it was 2, so we entered was 1 times 2, 2. Okay, just you can try this code in the Python tutor. Okay, I don't want to try everything, otherwise we don't finish. But you know, you can get familiar with these behaviors. Okay, so variables, let const. That's all. Okay, avoid var. Expressions. Well, there's plenty of expressions that we can write. The typical expressions, assignments, of course, comparisons in the if, for instance, and a lot of other operations. For instance, operation on strings, conditional ternary operators, so question mark and so on, which are quite used. And a lot of stuff which is typically not so much used. Okay, we will not have a look at all of them during the lecture. In case you need, you'll search for them. Okay, we already defined. We already seen the assignment let, okay, or const, depending on what you need. Comparison operators. We already saw the triple equal sign. Okay, the difference between the equal and the strict equal, as it is called, with also the version with the different, okay, not equal, is that one checks also the type while the other tries to convert one type into the other. Okay, so if you have the that's not a good. If you have 2 as a string and 2 as a number, the double equal will give you true, the triple equal will give you false. String and number. Okay? Otherwise, the double equal converts one into the other, following some rules. Okay? The rules are here. But I find that it's, I mean, it's difficult to remember all these rules. Okay? Try to use only what you really need, okay? Because then it's the string which is converted to the number to the string, vice versa. I mean, it can become difficult. So try to use the correct type, even though JavaScript doesn't enforce you to use correct types, because it can, you know, handle strings, number, etc. Transparently for you. But you know that when you read from an external source, I mean, when the user types strings, maybe you need a number because you need to do operations, do an explicit conversion. Okay? So you know that you read a string and then you get a number because you converted it. I know it might be, you know, a little bit more code to write, but it's better to be explicit, because JavaScript is already difficult by itself. Okay? For instance, just to give you an idea, if you write plus a string, it becomes a number, if possible. If you subtract 0, it stays the same number, but it becomes converted to a number. I mean, all these things are so nice to show on the slide, but then when you use it during coding, you know, you might easily forget what you did, especially after some time, when you have bugs and so on. Okay? So, be careful, in short. Be careful also when you are comparing things which are not number or strings, so are more complex objects. You have references inside the variable. So when you are comparing with the double or triple equal, basically you are comparing references. Okay, it's more or less like Python if you are familiar with Python. Okay, so if you really want to check the content, okay, you need to check manually by yourself if the content is the same. Otherwise, you check the reference. And it means that if you have a duplicate of the reference, it gives you true. Otherwise, not. So if you had, like here, an assignment of a new object to A and another object to B, okay, they're both false. We are not checking the content. There are two different objects. I declare two objects. If I say B equal to A, okay, they are the same reference. Because when I say B equal to A, we will see later, we copy the reference, not the object. Okay? So just be careful. That's the whole message of this lecture. Be careful, because JavaScript is very weird. Okay, logical stuff, when you need and, or, etc. Okay, there are some idioms. Okay, we will focus on idioms because they are all used a lot in JavaScript. Okay? A or B doesn't only work for Boolean values, but it works also for other types. So it means that if A evaluates truthy, okay, then the value of the whole expression is A. Otherwise, it's B. Okay? It's a sort of default value B for A. Okay? We don't know if A is initialized or not. Undefined evaluates as false. Okay? So, if we have a variable A, and we would like to have a default value for A, we can write A with the OR symbol and then the default value, and automatically this expression will take the value B if A has not been initialized, or A, okay, if it has been initialized. This is an idiom which is found very often in JavaScript code, and that's why, you know, we point it out. There's another one as well with the and symbol. Okay. Well, there's a lot of mathematical function. We don't really care. Any language has this stuff. And let's say a few words about control structure. That means how can we write code that behaves differently depending on conditional expressions. So control structures, control statements are the usual ones. They look like C. Okay. So if else, if, and so on. Switch case. Here they might be strings as well. Okay, different from C. The condition evaluates if the content is truthy. Okay, so it means it gets converted to Boolean according to all the rules that we have seen. So make it a Boolean, or make it clear from the code that which is the conversion that is happening. Okay. Loop, okay, for. You can write the for like in C, even though this is not very common in JavaScript. We will see in a minute how to write the loop. And you have do while and while, okay, like C. You may use the break and the continue. So this looks like C. You can write for in a different way. There are two different ways compared to C to write for in JavaScript. One is for a certain variable in something that we would like to iterate on, and the other one is for variable of, not in but of. Okay, so the first one is not that much use. We will see it on this slide and probably we will forget. Okay, because this iterates on all the properties of an object. We didn't see an object yet, and the properties as well. So, I mean, just to let you know, because you come from Python, probably you like, you know, this in operator, okay? But in JavaScript, again, it doesn't work as you expect. And the for that iterates over the elements as it does, for instance, in Python and so on, is for of, okay? Always for of. So if you have an array, it iterates over all the elements of the array. If you have a string, it iterates over all the elements of a string, and so on. It means the single characters. Okay. And instead, the for in is a bit peculiar. Okay, so iterates the variable over all the enumerable properties of an object, and also it doesn't give you the value, but it gives you the key. Okay, so let's forget about that. If it's needed, we will come to this back. Okay, I don't think so. I mean, there are other ways to iterate over an array, but they will be discussed later when we talk about functional programming. Okay. Exception, JavaScript supports the exceptions. Okay, so you can write try catch, you can have try catch finally, you can throw objects. That is the basic way in which you create an exception. There are exceptions already ready to be used. And then some of these exceptions are thrown by the execution environment, as we saw before, okay? Like syntax error, for instance, and so on. I mean, you don't have to use exception. Actually, I mean, we typically don't use exceptions except in promises, when we will see promises, and only if you really want to use them, okay? So, I mean, JavaScript programming nowadays is quite complete in terms of what you can do. So it supports exception and so on. But I mean, you don't have to use all this stuff. And also the programming effort that we will require for the project is not really write the code. Of course, there might be something to write. I mean, some functionality to write because the text requires, I don't know, to search for the first available slot. Okay, you need to write the for or while to search for the slot. Okay, but I mean, it's not really that part which is the main focus of this course. Main focus of this course is having a good design of the web application, of the management of the client part and the server part of the application, and so on. Okay. And we expect that you are able to write basic code. Okay, so let's come to something more interesting, arrays. Oops, yeah. Arrays, okay, first thing we need to notice, they don't need to be the same type. I mean, there can be elements that have different types, okay? So actually, more than arrays are sort of lists, but not even lists, because we will see that there can be holes, okay? Of course, the simplest syntax to write arrays, we already saw it, it's squared brackets, okay? There's a property .length, which is a property, not a function, so no brackets, that tells us how many elements are in the array. And then the arrays can be manipulated in different ways. There are functions that can manipulate the array in place. That means we change the array. And there are other functions that gives you a new array. So you have to do something on the array, like sort. Okay, there's a sort that manipulates the array in place. So it changes the position, actually the value, not the position, of the various elements in the array. And there's a sort that gives you a new array. Okay, if you like. If I'm not mistaken, I'm not confusing with Python. It doesn't matter. I mean, the concept is that one. There are functions that gives you a new array with what you asked for, and there are functions that just manipulate the array. So creating an array, that's the simplest thing. You open and close the squared bracket, and you have an empty array. Okay? If you put something inside, you have an array which is pre-filled with what you asked for, like 1, 2, 3. Okay. And as you saw here, you can have different values of different types inside the same array. Okay, this is the Python tutor representation of what we wrote on the left. Okay, that's one thing. And you can try the Python tutor. I mean, I'm not trying everything, otherwise we run out of time. And so what happens if you would like to create another array? Well, first of all, you need to decide, is it the same array? So I would like to have a new reference to the same array, or I would like a copy of the array. So a new array, two independent arrays. Okay? So if you would like to have a new reference, I think, no, not yet here. Yeah, you use the assignment operator as we saw before. I mean, v2 equal to v. Otherwise, if you use the functions like the ones which are here on the slide, array of, or there will be array from, okay, you create a new array. It means a copy of the array. Okay, these are library functions. Array, it's an object that comes with the JavaScript execution environment, like math that we saw before for the functions, mathematical functions, and so on. So when we would like to have a new array, a copy into a new array, so two different arrays, we can use, for instance, array of, okay, or we can create an array directly with array of, okay, like here, array of 1, 2, 3. It creates a new array. Simply, instead of opening the squared bracket, we give the values as parameters of the function. Okay, and you can see here also that the function can have, I mean, in JavaScript in general, function can have a variable number of parameters. Okay, it's up to the code that implements a function to decide to count how many parameters it has. Here we use it for 4 elements, 4 parameters. Okay? If there are questions, just ask me. Length adjusts automatically. So v, it's empty. We put elements. We ask for the length. In the end, it's 2 because we put 2 elements. Okay? Why it works like this? Because they are not really, arrays directly in the memory of the JavaScript execution environment. They are not like C. They are more like Python or Java. They are managed by the environment. So every time you touch the array, the environment knows it and updates the value of the length. Okay? There are quite a number of methods that you can call on arrays. Okay, so you can add elements with this function push. You can this adds at the end, and you can add also at the beginning with unshift. Okay, that's just a drawing showing you that there are 4 functions, basically 4 methods, if you like, to manipulate arrays, adding and removing elements, okay, from the beginning or from the end of the array. Okay, in place, of course, they modify the array. What about copying arrays? Sorry, before I was talking about copying, but was here. If you do something like this, alias equal to v, so another variable equal to v, you are copying the reference, because we said that the value contained in the variable is the reference. Okay? So, of course, it works until here, they are the same. But then if I write alias 1 equal to 5. What's the content of V? Of course, alias we know. Okay, in position 0 that's A, in position 1 that's 5. But what's the content of V? Well, the content of V is the same because it's an alias, so it has the same reference, same array. Okay, so remember that in case you would like to have a new object, a new array, you need to create it explicitly. Okay, you cannot just assign it. So console log V, it gives you 5 V in position 1, okay, not 8, because it's an alias. If you want to create a new array, well, there are different ways. This is one. Array from, that's a function in the library. Okay, you pass the array and it creates a new array. So you end up having 2 arrays. That's again the Python tutor representation. You can try it. Okay. No, there was another. Okay. No, there was another one. Yes, but it's not ES6. Okay. So just remember that it will create a shallow copy. What does shallow means? Means that if in the vector in the array there are other references, the references are just copied. You don't go recursively into the arrays, objects, and so on to create new object arrays. Okay? You just copy the references. I think next time we will see an example of this. Okay? Anyway, in any case, to create a new array, array from or array of if you have the single values. Iterating over arrays for of, that's what we said, and the rest we will see it with functional programming. There are a lot of predefined methods available for arrays in JavaScript. Join, okay? Join all the elements into a new string. Slice, splice, sort, etc. All the things that you might expect. Divide an array, sort an array, etc. Okay? So if you expect that something that you know in another language is possible on an array, it's probably possible in JavaScript as well. You just need to find the name of the function to do it. Okay? And here on the slides we put the most important functions. So in case you would like to experiment, you have a starting point. You don't have to ask ChatGPT. Okay? Even though probably it answers, maybe it creates a better slide. I don't know. Okay? A few peculiarities of JavaScript still on the arrays. Well, we can do assignments of an array to an array. That's a bit weird, right? So we can put an array on the left side of the assignment. What happens is that every element on the right side gets assigned to the corresponding element on the left. So let x, y, 1, 2. That means that x will get 1 and y will get 2. And they will get created as well because it's let. Okay? It's a bit weird, but I mean sometimes they are convenient because you can express things more in a more compact way, and it improves readability in a certain sense. Okay, if things are not too big. So var foo 1, 2, 3. So there are 3 strings, and you can create three variables with name 1, 2, and 3. You can assign foo, and 1 will get the string 1, 2 will get the string 2, and so on. Okay, that's exactly the same example as before. Here I use var. Well, I should not use it, right? I mean, there's no reason why it's a var. Okay, it's just to show you that what you can do with the let, you can do it with the var, and vice versa. Okay, Just try not to use the var, because the var has all the problems that we had before, said before. Okay? Sometimes this way of writing is very useful while returning values from functions. Right? If you have to return two values from a function, what do you do? Well, you come from Python, probably you already do this. Okay? But from C, you know it's difficult. You need to return a struct or stuff like that, right? Here, I mean, you return an array, for instance, and you can directly assign the values of the array returned by the function directly into the correct variable, x, y, and so on. Okay? Okay, spread operator, so the three dots, dot, dot, dot. Well, that's really useful again. It can be used to expand some iterable object. Here in this example are all arrays into parts, okay? Where the syntax of JavaScript requires a list of elements separated by the comma. You see the example. X, Y, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have two variables on the left and four elements in the array on the right. Okay? What happens if there are 5 elements or 6? I mean, if you would like to use the same writing as before, we should write 5 variables, 6 variables, and so on. If we don't know, well, we have this trick. So, what corresponds to the first element is put into the first element. What corresponds to the second element is put to the second element, and the rest, well, actually, if there's a rest, okay, so the spread operator, everything which remains is put into the remaining variable, y. So you end up with x equal to 1, and y is still an array only with 2, 3, 4. Okay? I mean, it's pretty intuitive, I think. These are things which are reasonably intuitive for JavaScript, right? Compared to what we saw before. And basically, this allows you, for instance, to extract the first element from the array, or to eliminate an element from the array, because in y, it remains only the remaining part of the array, right? Excluding the first element. It works also in the middle, as you see here, right? I mean, it gets expanded also in the middle, sorry. So you have head, 3 dot parts, and tools, and you will end up with head, shoulder, knees, and tools. Okay? So this is expanded in various elements. Okay? You will get familiar with this syntax. I mean, it's more difficult to say than to use it. Okay? What happens if I don't put the 3 dots? Well, parts is an array. So I will end up with a string, an array, a string, a string. Okay? So they're not all strings. I'm just assigning an array. That's a type in JavaScript. So that's what happens. If you don't trust me, try it with a Python tutor. Okay? You will have the representation, the graphical representation. So this spread is nice because it gives us the possibility to write what you see in the last line. Since if we write b equal to a, we make a copy of the reference. If we want a copy of the array, we can open the square bracket, 3 dots a. This expands the array, and then the square bracket creates the new array. Okay? This is a very frequent idiom. That's why we put a slide on this. Okay? And the other options are just from A, which expects an array, or off, which actually expects a comma-separated list of parameters, where in this case you need to put a spread. Okay? Because you need to expand it to a comma-separated list. Strings, well, it's very simple. Strings are immutable objects. They are an ordered sequence of Unicode characters. So anything which is supported by Unicode can be put into a string. Okay? The length of the string is the number of characters it contains, not the bytes. Okay? And this creates a little bit of problem because this support for Unicode in JavaScript means that you need to remember that there's not only English, Italian, and so on. There's Chinese and so on, and there's the emoji and stuff like that, which complicate things. So always manipulate strings by using functions for strings. Okay, so you are sure that you are manipulating them correctly regardless of the content. Well, the first character starts at 0, position 0, like with the arrays. There's no characters in JavaScript. We said numbers, strings, and booleans, right? So how do we represent a character? Well, that's a string of length 1. No problem. Okay. String literals. So when we define a string, we can use the double quotation or the single quotation mark. Okay, single or double quotation. Just be careful because at a certain point we will talk about JSON in this course, and JSON works only with the double quotation. So it's up to you. But in the code you can write whatever you like, single or double. You can use some operators on strings. The most common ones is probably a plus, concatenate strings. You have the dot length. Okay. You can access single characters with the index, no problem. You just cannot write there because it's immutable. It's read-only, okay? But you can read from positions in the string. A lot of methods, I mean, you will check them when you need it, okay? Yeah, be careful of the Unicode issues. As I told you, Unicode is, 16-bit Unicodes are not enough to represent all the possible character and symbols. Okay, so this correspondence between symbols and bytes and characters is not always one-to-one. Okay, but I mean, this is just mentioned because to warn you, like for the rest of JavaScript. For the purpose of the project, typically we don't rely on strange characters or stuff like that. So, this is just a warning. Okay. This is the last one. Template literals. There's a third way to define a string. So, first one is the single quotation mark, double quotation mark. Third one is the backtick. I'm not sure if you have it. On the Italian keyboard it's not present, but on the English one it's present. It's this accent with the orientation that you see on the slide. What's the difference? The difference is that inside you can write expression $ with these curly brackets, and these expressions will be interpreted by JavaScript and will be substituted with the value of what you write inside, typically a variable. Okay, so like if you write hello $name, and name contains a string, it will be substituted with the value of the string. Okay, that's a way to put a value inside the string that can be changed by the code. Okay, very intuitive, I would say, right? It's very useful for formatting strings in short. Okay. The other thing you should notice is that template literals. So when you start a string with the backticks, you can go to multiple lines. It sometimes is convenient. Okay. Which is not so that easy with the other ways of writing strings. So I invite you to test something that we saw today. I know it's really basic. I mean, we talked about strings, arrays, and so on, stuff which is really basic for somebody who is able to program. But try some of these expressions in the Python tutor, especially the ones with the arrays. Visualize how they works. And next time, which is actually Thursday, so no lecture tomorrow because it's lab and we are not going to have lab this week. So Thursday, we will go on, okay? There are already the slides online, and we will talk about JavaScript, I think function, objects and functions, right? Okay, that's the basic elements we need to know to go on to carry on with the learning JavaScript. Okay, if you have questions or any other issue, please come to the desk after the lecture, okay, or write to the Telegram, okay. I will not answer during night, but during day I'll try to answer. Okay. Okay, thank you. See you Thursday. Bye bye.